Hey guys, this is Jesse with JTS Woodworking, and in this video, I'm going to be building the largest cutting board ever. I guess that's not true. The largest one I've made though. All right, what's going on everybody? So I cut my pieces to length, which was they're going to be 30 inches. I cut them a little over 30. You always want to cut a little longer than what you need. You can always cut off the excess later. So I'll probably cut 32, 33 inch strips of maple, walnut, and padauk, and purple heart. And then now I'm just ripping them to 1.5 inches, which will be the thickness of the cutting board. Wow. Well, I guess it's time to use my favorite toy. Alright, so this truly is my new favorite toy. This is a Jet 1836 drum sander. Super expensive, but man, is it worth the money, especially if you're doing cutting boards. But there's so many uses for it. So anyways, right here I'm just getting rid of all the burn marks that I caused by the table saw, so that the glue up goes properly, so that the glue adheres and all that stuff. Sanding every single piece, and then gonna flip it up like that on the edge grain. Now my camera cut out here, so you'll see that I didn't quite get the glue up filmed. Alright guys, sorry about that. Something went weird with my phone here. I was hoping to show you the whole glue up, and I realized my phone wasn't recording it, but I had to I had to get the glue up going because the glue was drying. So here's the glue up. Actually hurt my thumb doing it, so that was fun. But anyways, here's the glue up. I got pipe clamps on the bottom. I got these Bessie bar clamps on the top. I'm not worried about any cauls. The clamps on the top kind of work as cauls, but I'm going to be running it through my drum sander after it dries, after I scrape off with the glue, obviously, because this is way too wide to fit in my planer. But yeah, that's how it's looking so far. It's going to look much better once we sand it. Alright, so now I'm removing the clamps. I love these Bessie clamps, by the way. They're awesome. They're expensive, but man, I'm starting to collect more of them. So anyways, so now I am scraping off as much glue as I can with the razor blade here. That way it will be ready for the drum sander. Alright, I'm using my drum sander because my planer is only a 13-inch planer. And this 1836 Jet drum sander, well, as you can see, it's open-ended. So it can sand 18 inches, and then you flip it around and it can sand another 18 inches. So it can sand up to 36 inches wide. So this is a little over 20 inches. So it's perfect. It just comes out a little bit on the end, but then you just flip it on the other side and it sands the other side. So with each pass, it gets cleaner and cleaner. It actually didn't take that long, to be honest. The sandpaper is fairly aggressive. Alright, so now that that's done, we're just trimming it to width. So we're going to trim it to 20 inches wide. Just taking off a little bit on one side, try to make it even looking, and then a little bit on the other side, get it to 20 inches. And then I'm going to use my crosscut sled to cut it to length. Just cut off one end. Make sure it's square by using the crosscut sled, and then measure 30 inches, and boom, it's all done. So now I am cutting the juice groove. I was actually pretty nervous about this because I've never used a template like this, or I've never used a jig like this before. I had to build this jig to make these juice grooves, and I was afraid of tear out and it getting pulled, you know, one way and digging into the board. You have to make shallow passes, okay? And I found that going clockwise actually cut better. So you guys have to play with it. I did make too deep of passes. I should have made more shallow passes. Always err on the side of caution, go too shallow rather than too deep. But it ended up working out. I think there was only one spot that had a little tear out I had to repair. All right, and made my final pass there, and it looked pretty good. So now what I'm doing is I'm chamfering all the corners. I chamfer the corners like that first, and then I chamfer the edges because it really reduces or eliminates any tear out on the corners there when you run it along. If you do the corners first, like I did upright, that's the way to go. So I do the bottom and I did the top. Got a nice chamfer all the way around. I really like the chamfered look. Now here's my laser engraver. I've had this for a few months now, and this is way sped up, but basically this guy who bought this for me wanted it engraved, and so I said, let's do it. It really sets it apart. I'm really glad I have this laser engraver. It's not the most expensive one on the market, but man, it does a great job. And this engraving probably took an hour and a half or so, so it takes some time, but again, you just set it and forget it and wait for it to ding, and it's done. Now you will have to go back and sand it later to get all the burn marks off, but I just ran it through the drum sander very lightly and took care of most of it. Alright, so now I'm routering out the handholds. Just set up these stop blocks on my router table so that I get a nice even handhold, and I just make shallow passes again until I get it to the height I want it. I'm using it's a cove bit. It's a giant cove bit, like a 3/4 inch cove bit. Alright, so here I was nervous about this too, using my branding iron. So I wanted to brand it. I haven't used my branding iron very much, and you really need to practice, especially practice on the type of wood that you're going to do the branding on. But it turned out good. Just had to sand it a little bit, and it actually turned out really nice. So now we're sanding. The drum sander is an 80 grit sandpaper, so I just started at 120. And then after I sanded all the nooks and crannies at 120, I had to raise the grain. And you need to do this on cutting boards, because if you don't raise the grain, the first time it gets wet or washed, the grain will raise and it'll feel all fuzzy and weird. So you raise the grain first. Right after you sand from to 120, spritz it with water, let it dry. You can use a heat gun or whatever to dry it faster. That's what I did. And then you sand it with 220 or 240 or whatever you have. And then you're done. You've got all the fuzzies off, and you do that to both sides. I did it to all the juice grooves and handholds, and then it's ready for oil, basically. Alright, so we're just hitting it with that 220, and then I didn't have a container large enough for this cutting board. I was planning on soaking it overnight. So what I did is I just put it in this container, put the oil on it, spread it all around a couple times, and then let it dry overnight, and came back and did the same thing, just to get as much oil penetration as I possibly could. It looks pretty good. So we're just going to let that oil dry, wipe off the excess, and rub in our wax. So this is walrus oil wax. It's really good. It's really thick and it's hard to spread on, so I got this little trick I used just while I'm applying it. Just use a heat gun on a low setting while you're wiping it, and it kind of melts it as you're wiping it, and it makes it much easier to spread on. Alright guys, so that's it. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please leave it a like, please comment, please subscribe, hit the bell notification, share it if you would like, all that stuff. I'd appreciate it. and I was really happy with how it turned out. You know, it was such a large cutting board. I've done cutting boards in the past. If you've seen my other video at the craft fair, I think I did a dozen cutting boards there, and we did well, and it was fun. You know, I like doing the cutting board thing. It's really cool, especially now that I can engrave them. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks.